Welcome back, guys, or if you're new to my channel, this is Automotive Anonymous, and I'm currently driving a 2010 Corvette. It has an LS3, it has a giant cam, and it makes loads of power. If you guys can still hear me, watch this. This thing is not messing around. Even the aftermarket radio thinks I'm over the speed limit on my private CGI road. But this thing is insane. I've driven a lot of high horsepower cars. In fact, I did a 2024 Corvette Stingray with vertical doors just about a week ago. And this might be one of the rowdiest cars I have ever driven, maybe even the rowdiest. If you like big cammed engines, the color blue, or my video, please consider liking my video. That small kindness goes a long way. It helps me know you want to see more stuff like this, and it helps YouTube know you want to see more stuff like this in general. Thank you, guys. With full bolt-ons and a cam from Texas Speed, this big 6.2 liter LS3 probably makes well over 450 wheel horsepower at the peak, and it's rowdy. But without my foot on the gas pedal, just cruising around at, 1300 RPM, it's still very loud. And when I get up to a little bit higher in the RPM range, there are some drones. So if I personally own this, I might change out the cat back to stock. In fact, when I idle this, the hood shakes. You can really feel that this is a rowdy big V8. But anyways, driving a C6, if you haven't before, the A-pillar is pretty thin. The side mirrors actually do a good job while being very thin and sporty, especially. They're very horizontal, not very vertical. And the B-pillar does it's not really wide. The side mirrors take care of that visibility. And then you have 22 cubic feet of room back here with the rear view mirror that goes right down the center. So honestly, the Corvette as a platform, especially the C5 to C7, is a really good vehicle. It's almost like a grand touring car that you can just drive around, enjoy, and do a lot of things with. This one is, unfortunately, the 6-speed auto, which modern automatics are faster than modern manuals, unfortunately. Unlike, 30 years ago. Although I'm not sure the paddle shifters are going to be that useful to you unless you're actually just downshifting to prepare for a rolling race. They are pretty cool in that you can use either side. It'll limit the gear if it thinks you're trying to get up too high, and likewise for going too low. But it's cool because you can do it with one hand. Not very fast to respond. It's not very fast to respond though, because this is an old 6-speed by GM. But it's honestly a pretty cool feature. And, some engine braking, engine revving. Honestly, it's pretty fun. But let's see how it corners. I'm currently going about 55, so we'll go a little bit slower. But usually C6 stay pretty flat depending on the suspension. Yeah. And then a little bit of power. Yeah, this is a rowdy car, even with traction control on normal driving mode. It wants to get the rear loose, at literally the push of the throttle pedal. It really doesn't take much. But overall, and the blue color that this is in, it's one of the best looking C6s in my opinion. It does have an appearance package. It does have all the typical Corvette squeaks, cracks, and rattles, and all the things that honestly are pretty typical in a GM car. But even right here, just going about 15 miles an hour, I'm sure it doesn't portray very well on camera just how rowdy and wild this thing is. It really feels like something special. It doesn't take much for it to get a lot louder and to pull really hard, but because there is so much power, if you just give it a little bit of gas and you don't stab the gas pedal, it won't downshift. It'll just ride out the gear that you're in. But honestly, I'm just too spoiled because a lot of the really fast stuff I've driven are things like the Tesla Plaid, the all-wheel drive Hellcats. Those are all-wheel drive. This thing's rear-wheel drive. And it really likes to get wild. But it's quite the experience. It honestly feels like very few other things on the road. Everything modern seems to be very mild and numb. It has such advanced traction and stability controls, but you really can't feel what's going on in the modern cars. Sure, the steering, you don't really feel anything through that, but it is sharp. It changes directions quite well. These drilled and slotted Corvette rotors, even at maybe 30% brake pedal, they slow you right down. So there's a lot of good stuff that this has going for it. And, you know, it's fun to drive. Things that aren't fun to drive include a giant semi-truck based RV. But something like a C6 Corvette that can be had for 20 to 30 grand. This example is about 30 grand, but it has 10 grand in performance parts, and it feels solid. It feels done right. The tires have good tread depth, and I think it has a lot of life in it, especially for only having 56,000 miles on the odometer. This LS engine is literally just getting started. You can corner pretty well though, keeping traction. But yeah, this car,
over the speed limit.
I don't know why it keeps telling me I'm over the speed limit, but this car really feels good. We're gonna get back into town and out of the country, and let's just take a few more minutes to see how it handles, you know, civilian life. Whether you're in a suburb, a city, whatever your geographical location looks like, which by the way, comment below. I'd love to know where you guys are watching from. And then in just a minute, we're gonna do a 0 to 60. But before we do the 0 to 60, keep in mind that today,
you are over the speed limit.
Our altitude is about 4,000 feet. So naturally aspirated engines are down on power 3 to 3.5% per 1,000 feet, meaning this one is down 12 to 14%. I'm sure it, you know, cranks out at 550 horsepower, so maybe like 460, 470 to the tire, something in that ballpark, I'd imagine. So it's still gonna be down on power quite a bit. It's gonna be fighting for traction, but it still should be a very fun time. And true 0 to 60 came in at 4.75. And that was just a baby-sized launch. And just sitting at a light, I can feel vibration. I hope you guys can see that. Yeah, the C6 with the big cam is a really fun ride. Probably not the best daily driver, especially with this exhaust, but one of the best toys you can have for 30 grand. Yeah, absolutely. Heck, even like a turbo Polaris Razor costs this much these days. So even though it's a 14-year-old car, it only has 56,000 miles, which by the way, I'll link this one in the description below. It's at Twin Falls Chevy. Great dealership for letting me borrow it for the day. Really a good deal, and it feels solid. Other than the squeaks and creaks I mentioned earlier, it has a few aftermarket things like the Bluetooth microphone up there, the aftermarket stereo that likes to tell you when it thinks you're above the speed limit, so there must be a GPS component to it as well. But overall, no cracks on the dash or the door panels. It feels really solid. It started right up when I cold started it earlier. We did let it warm up a little bit because it is a big cam car, but it seems solid. If you guys want more details on this, definitely check out my full review of the C6, which I probably posted a couple weeks earlier on this one. I also did that LS2 car about a year ago. I really like Corvettes, and when there's a good opportunity to drive one, why the heck not? Am I right? Honestly, guys, after driving around town for a little bit, I feel like I'm driving something like a motorcycle, where it's just a rowdy, unruly, kind of loud ride. And I think a lot of people probably are gonna sense you coming up on them. They could probably just about feel the vibrations from this car, from all the airflow coming out of it, kind of like bass on a speaker system. Which, speaking of, are you really gonna be listening to the speakers when you have that glorious LS engine to listen to? Probably not. Plus, you have to turn them up pretty high, and at that point, the bass speakers, which these have about a 7-speaker system, they're gonna get pretty distorted, and you're not gonna be having a good time. So keep this focused on the driving experience. That's where it has a lot of fun. But even just idling again, it doesn't sound like it's gonna die. The tune seems to be well done. So whichever shop did that tune, good for them. But overall, you saw the 0 to 60. It wasn't fantastic. 4.75. That was the best of 2 runs. The other one was a 4.95, so at least it's fairly consistent, doing a similar type of acceleration, which is leaving traction on, keeping it in normal drive, letting the transmission do its thing, and then progressively applying power to try to limit the wheel spin. I could still feel a little bit of rowdiness in the rear, but it wasn't nearly as bad. If we turn off traction control, you could basically count us as good as dead. Or if I do a brake rev, same thing, it's gonna be fighting the system. The rear is not gonna be doing anything but spinning and not staying straight. And spinning ain't winning. So although the true time was a 4.75, and without rollout at the bottom of the graph, it's a 442. That's basically what these were rated at, bone stock from the factory. And that was one of the sissiest launches I've ever had to do in a performance car. That just shows how much is left on the table. If this was on a sticky track prepped surface, you know, and you could actually launch this thing, even with the automatic going up to the torque converter, probably like a 2000 RPM rev, whatever this allows for, you know, the 6-speed back in the day, I have no doubt this would do anything above even a 3.5. I'm sure it's a 3.3 to a 3.5, because this thing is insane. It really feels like there is a whole lot left on the table, but we just can't show you today because we're not in the right conditions to, you know, demonstrate what a 500 wheel horsepower Corvette really has the power to do. But driving it around all these other cars, it still feels like a Corvette. The horn works, you know, the brakes work, the lights work. It's street legal, but you're gonna be having so much fun that it almost doesn't feel like it should be legal. And with how much power you have, it's not going to take much more than a subtle little toe push of the pedal to not be doing something that's legal. So anyways, guys, if you enjoyed this video, please give it a like, comment your thoughts and opinions below and where you're watching from, and subscribe if you haven't already. If you want to watch the more official objective review on this car, you can find that on my channel. It, again, was likely posted a couple weeks earlier than when this video comes out, but just know that I had a lot of fun, and I hope you guys had a lot of fun watching this. If you had even 11% the fun I had, I think we're all winners today. Anyways, if you guys want this vehicle, I'll link it in my description below. It's at Twin Falls Chevy.
Over the speed limit.
Great dealership, and until next time, take care.